What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. We've got a tremendous show lined up for you today because we're going to talk about strategy for the Patriots in their regular season finale. How should they approach this game against the Dolphins in terms of managing injury, maybe going after that 1 seed if it's available to them, maybe making sure they grab onto and lock in that number 2 seed depending on their potential opponent. Fascinating machinations there. We're also going to talk about ideal opponent in the wild card round if they're playing on wild card weekend. And we're going to have a ton of discussion on the MVP race. We're bringing in our good friend Mike Sando of The Athletic. Just had a tremendous note on Drake Maye versus Matthew Stafford in his most recent Pick 6 column on The Athletic. If you haven't seen it already, make sure you go and check it out. Make sure you're reading him every single week. The best in the business when it comes to covering the league at large. He's also one of the 50 AP voters for things like Most Valuable Player and Coach of the Year award. And so we'll have a chance to ask him about Mike Vrabel and his chances of maybe taking home some hardware after the season as well. But before we get to Sando, I want to share with you my thoughts on the MVP race and share with you some of what I think are critical data points when it comes to this discussion. And we'll start with the numbers laid out for us by Mike Sando, because I thought he did a great job of giving us what is the MVP average in a number of different categories. And so the general MVP caliber season when it comes to yards per attempt, touchdown interception ratio, quarterback rating, things of that ilk, all the way going back to the year 2000. And then where does Matthew Stafford sit? Where does Drake Maye sit? I'll hit you with those numbers right now. Let's start with yards per attempt. Matthew Stafford, after his performance in Week 17, 3 picks against the Falcons in a nip-tuck sort of game, and one of those picks is a pick 6. Did that lose him the award? We will see. But after that game, and I've updated some of Sando's numbers because his column came out before that Monday night contest, Stafford is now at 8.0 in terms of yards per attempt. The MVP average is just a tick above that, 8.2, going back to the year 2000. And Drake Maye, he's at 8.9, so check mark for Maye. Touchdown interception ratio. This is where Stafford is going to have Maye. 42 touchdown passes, 8 picks now for Stafford. Same number of picks for Drake Maye, but only 30 touchdown passes, only in air quotes. Now, Maye has accounted for 34 total touchdowns, 34 versus 42. That's a little closer, but you could make the argument 8 touchdowns over the course of a full season. That's a sizable gap. The MVP average is a 37 touchdown, 9 pick season since the year 2000. Quarterback rating, Matthew Stafford dropped to 108.8 after that Falcons game. The MVP average since 2000 is 108.1. Drake Maye all the way up at 112.9. And side note, this would be, if it holds, the second highest quarterback rating season in Patriots history, behind only the 2007 season that Tom Brady put together, which we know was a historic year. EPA per pass for Stafford is at 0.19, okay, for all the nerds out there. The MVP average is actually 0.28, significantly above what Stafford has done this year. Drake Maye much closer to the average at 0.27. Rush yards, Drake Maye blows Stafford out of the water, 409 to -2. The average is 237.8. And rushing touchdowns, obviously, again, Drake Maye at 4, Stafford at 0. The MVP average is right around 3. I would add, in terms of the data points that matter here, ESPN's QBR metric, which I find useful. It does use EPA, but it factors in a lot of different things. It does look at schedule as well. Drake Maye is first this year at 76.5. Matthew Stafford is fourth at 70.1. And the stat that not enough people are talking about, if you're asking me, when it comes to this discussion, is completion percentage over expected. This is an accuracy stat. You've heard me talk about it before here on this podcast, on the Patriots Talk podcast. There are a couple different ways to calculate this thing, so depending on where you look, the numbers are different. I like the next-gen stats version because it uses the GPS tracking devices on all of these players over the course of these games, over the course of a season, and it calculates just how difficult it was to make a given throw. Drake Maye blows the field out of the water. He is the most accurate quarterback in football this year. He has a completion percentage over expected of 8.9. That is first with a bullet. Brock Purdy is second. Matthew Stafford is 13th with a completion percentage over expected of 1.6. I find accuracy to be one of the most important quarterbacking stats. And if this MVP award is a quarterback award, which I think it should be, there is no position that is more valuable than that position in the sport. And there may be no more valuable trait at the most valuable position than accuracy. Drake Maye blows the field out of the water. And if you want to look at things like schedule, if you want to look at things that are more team-oriented, right? If you want to favor Drake Maye, for instance, because the team around him not as impressive as the team around Matthew Stafford, and I would agree with you there, I think you do have to give Stafford some credit for playing the more difficult schedule. So for me, those two things may balance out on the scales. However, common opponents, they have had a half dozen, and Drake Maye's numbers against those common opponents this year in 2025 are much better than Stafford's. Maye's 6-0 against those teams, and those teams include, by the way, the Titans, Ravens, Saints, Bucks, Panthers, and Falcons. Stafford's 4-2 in those games. Maye's completion percentage is 70. Stafford's is 67.2. Total touchdowns to interceptions. Drake Maye, total touchdowns 14, 3 interceptions. Stafford, 14. So right on par with each other there. But 6 interceptions in those common opponent games. Total yards per game, Drake Maye, about 40 total yards per game more than Stafford at 292 versus 255. Passer rating, Maye significantly better at 117.6. Stafford not bad at 102.9, but again, check mark for Maye. And then EPA per dropback, significantly better. 0.26 for Maye, 0.08 for Stafford. So the schedule argument for Stafford, to me, takes a hit when you look at their common opponents and you see what Drake Maye was able to do against those clubs. What does Mike Sando think about this battle, and how tight is it exactly? Let's talk to one of the voters, Mike Sando, right now. There he is, Mike Sando, and I want to ask you right out of the chutes, Mike, here on the Next Pats podcast, we've been discussing this MVP thing for a while, and I know you're one of the 50 voters that determines the MVP award winner, and even if you don't want to share with us your pick for MVP, totally understandable.
Yeah.
Do you think that Drake Maye might have won the award this past Monday when Matthew Stafford threw 3 picks on Monday Night Football?
I think he won it Monday and Sunday. So it could be because Josh Allen's pass goes incomplete. Okay. I don't think Josh Allen was going to win the award, but he was a guy that I've been looking at with Drake Maye and Stafford as probably the 3 that I thought were potentially most deserving, depending on how they finished. And so, if somehow, Allen had completed that or done other stuff, whatever. I mean, you could have at least talked about him. I think that went by the wayside, and now I think Stafford, clearly the odds flipped completely overnight. I was surprised that Drake Maye wasn't the betting favorite Sunday night after the big game against the Jets, because Stafford was coming off, a good game, but they lost against Seattle. And so this to me totally makes Maye, I'd be surprised if he didn't win it.
We referenced, Mike, some of the numbers that you referenced in your Pick 6 column when it came to Stafford v. Maye, and some of the advanced numbers are really fascinating. I want to ask you first, just in your opinion, and when you're weighing these things, what are the most pertinent data points for you when you're thinking about the MVP award?
Well, I do think it's generally a quarterback. I do think it's generally in the name of success of your team. I think we start there. And then I do look at some things like I will give some extra points to somebody, like Lamar Jackson a little bit last year. For half of the year, his defense, special teams were kind of bad, and like he's driving them to win the games anyway. I think that's a degree of difficulty thing that I look at. They're all going to usually probably be among the top 2 or 3 statistical quarterbacks in the league, but that type of thing, the team context, how hard is it for them? That's a little bit in the back of my mind. And then what I do is I can just pull up like the last 25 MVPs or 20 MVPs pretty easily and just look at kind of their numbers. And it's not really any one number. I do, I'll look at kind of a number of these different things. And some of it's, I do like the EPA stats. I do. I have one that's like, takes the EPA and all the plays where you caught a pass, threw a pass, ran the ball, scrambled, whatever. That's just kind of a catch-all bucket of production. And then I will look at some things Like I'll compare some things like, hey, yards per pass attempt, some traditional stuff. Not like it's going to hinge on that. I just sort of like to see it. I'll look at the passer rating. We know it's a totally flawed stat, but you're kind of looking at all these different things, and when a bunch of them line up, to me, you feel better about it. You're sort of checking yourself against what you see, what you know. We know coming into the year, people were picking New England to be a bad team. We know that they don't have, they're in the first year of this offense. They don't have Jamar Chase and those guys. The quarterback's doing a lot of this. So, uh, I'm putting a bunch of those types of things together when I do it. And then I usually feel really good about it in the end.
I love the three words that you used when you talk about degree of difficulty, because that to me brings in that word and highlights that word valuable. That is part of this award, and our buddy, our mutual buddy Tom Curran last year, and last year was his last year voting for MVP. But he did an interesting thing where he voted for Josh Allen as MVP because he felt like the situation Allen was in was not as strong as the situation Lamar Jackson was in. But he believed Lamar Jackson actually had the better season in a vacuum, so he voted for Lamar Jackson as his first team All-Pro, and Josh Allen was most valuable. Do you look at things like strength of schedule, for instance? I think a lot of people sort of detract from Drake Maye because they look at the schedule, and maybe it plays to that degree of difficulty thing that you're talking about. Stafford played in the NFC West. That's maybe the best division in football. Do you give Stafford extra points over Maye because of the teams they played?
I mean, not too much. I think that we look at those extreme things, but it's funny. I was talking to a coach this morning. He's like, "Hey, these teams in the NFC West with all these wins, they played the NFC South this year. So they have their schedule things too. Seattle was up on New Orleans by like 30 points in the first half. Okay, so they got to play some easy teams too, and so I don't think so. Look, Drake May's good. We can all see that he's good. We see that he makes special plays. We see that he's a huge reason for them winning. I can't imagine what they'd be doing if they had just a slightly below average quarterback. They wouldn't be in this position at all. So I'm not taken away off of that. I'm not usually totally swayed, on that sort of a thing. I suppose if there were two guys you felt were absolutely equal and I can't make up my mind, could you find a schedule thing maybe? But I'm not basing it on that.
How stunned are you just by Drake May's season, Mike, as somebody who covers the league as closely as you do? And does somebody like Josh McDaniels, I mean, is he now in the running for assistant of the year because of the success that his quarterback has had?
I mean, maybe, but was Aiden O'Connell flourishing were the quarterbacks flourishing with the Raiders when he was there? I'm sure he did just as good of a job of coaching. Maybe he didn't because he had to be the head coach, and maybe that's harder. And so maybe those guys didn't get the individualized full Josh McDaniels treatment. But look, not every quarterback Josh coaches does this, right? I mean, a lot of it's on the player. And I think your ability to improve and work on it and all of those things, no one knows that better than New England fans because they had the ultimate guy who did that. You have to be open to the coaching. And so, good coaching makes a big difference, but you got to be a good student to get it. There's lots of good coaches who get fired because their quarterback didn't play well, and it wasn't all their fault. So I give the quarterback, there's an old coach many years ago, Ernie Zampese, who said, you want to be a good quarterback coach, get yourself a good quarterback. And I believe that.
Words to live by, no question. And it is interesting that Drake Maye's taken the coaching from Josh McDaniels for sure, but he's also taken the coaching from Mike Vrabel. And this is something we've sort of tracked here, Mike, Tom and I especially, when it comes to the leadership quotient. Because Mike Vrabel, I'm sure he could teach Drake Maye plenty about offensive football. He played his share of offense as a player. He was primarily a defensive guy. I'm sure there are things defensively he could show Drake Maye, but it's that leadership thing that he really has been pushing on Maye since training camp, very overtly. And it feels like Maye has come along in that regard too. Does Mike Vrabel have an argument for coach of the year, just given the jump that this team has made, not just the quarterback, but the team overall? Or are there others out there that maybe we're not watching as closely here in New England, Mike, that are just as, if not more, deserving for that coach of the year honor?
I think Vrabel's probably the favorite because of what was expected of the team, where they've been, getting the most out of players. And it's interesting this week, with the Stephon Diggs stuff coming out. Before that stuff came out, I was kind of giving Vrabel some credit too. I mean, hey, here's a guy who's had issues in, where he's gone and it's gone pretty smoothly. Well, that's out the window. I don't know that Vrabel gets blamed for that, but they've gotten great production from him. And I thought that was something you look at from a coach as well. So to me, I think Vrabel's probably the best candidate. I do think that there's five guys probably, that you could really make a good case for. I mean, we saw the 49ers the other night with Kyle Shanahan playing half the year without your quarterback and a bunch of other guys out. Their receiving core's been decimated. Their defense, you lose, I mean, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. I mean, those could be the best players at their position in the league almost, right? So, and here they are, winning and doing well. So I think he's a good one. I think Mike McDonald's done a great job in Seattle, but it's sort of a 2-year thing where I think they've been building to it. But to me, Vrabel coming in that first year, he would be my favorite, I think, right now.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, Mike, the report or the announcement from the Chargers earlier this week that they would not be playing quarterback Justin Herbert in their regular season finale seems to place them probably in that number 7 seed spot, because if they lose and the Bills beat the Jets, which I would expect, that's how that would fall. The Bills would jump to 6, the Chargers to 7, and obviously the Chargers just want to get healthy, they want to get rested, and I understand that. But there has to be some piece of their thinking here, and part of the equation is they don't really care that they have to come to Foxborough and play the Patriots, because if they really did and they wanted to avoid them, they would go all out, try to win that 6th seed, and then maybe they'd be okay playing the Jaguars. Do you believe that that's part of their thinking at all? Do you think that maybe the Patriots are not? You don't. I'm just wondering, Mike, are the Patriots a team that isn't feared by the rest of the NFL because they just are still sort of in that nascent stage of their organization?
I'd say this about the AFC in general. I'll give you any 2 teams and I'll take the field to get to the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Don't you feel that way where like any one of these, Jacksonville could get there. They have a good defense. Quarterback's playing well. Patriots could get there. I think there's a case to a lot of these teams, but I would way rather have the field than any one team. And I was even thinking today, would I take the field over any 2? I mean, I might. Let's just say you pick New England for 1. Who would be your other pick? Houston or somebody? I don't know. I might take my chances with the rest of the teams getting there. So I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think they are a team that really has a banged up quarterback that they can't protect. And, Justin Herbert's been out there with a broken hand and who knows what else. He is their meal ticket. With the state of their roster, they need him at his best. I think if they put him out there this next week, shoot, they get him hurt more. He maybe missed the playoffs. So I think that was a bigger risk for them than we have to play the Patriots. I think it's all about them and just trying to make it to the postseason healthy.
You understand how New England people are, though, Mike. We tend to get a little defensive. Hey, do they not respect the Patriots enough? Is that what they're saying here? No, it's probably about getting the quarterback as healthy as humanly possible.
If he wasn't hurt or something, I just think he's hurt. He's struggling out there.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for being with us here on Next Pass, sharing your tremendous insight. Make sure, dear viewers, dear listeners, if you're not already, go follow Mike at Sando NFL on X. Make sure you're reading his Pick 6 column on The Athletic. Tremendous stuff there, including this week a text message from one Bill Belichick about Joe Thuney and the success he's had. You have to go check it out if you haven't read it already. Mike, thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much, Phil.
All right, coming up on Next Pats, we're talking about some of the college football stars we haven't yet touched on this season who could be fits for the New England Patriots in the 2026 draft. We're also taking some of your mail. It's all coming up next on Next Pats. All right, you know what time it is. It's time for our Who's Next segment. This is our opportunity to share with you some of the names that we feel are among the most intriguing in the 2026 NFL draft, and we're specifically focusing on positions that we think will be positions of need or positions of value for the New England Patriots in the here and now and moving forward for the foreseeable future as well. And we're going to start at the offensive tackle spot. Yes, you spent your first pick on Will Campbell last year. You're not looking for a left tackle of the future, but you might be looking for a right tackle of the future. Morgan Moses has performed, I think, tremendously well, especially given that he has been fighting through a handful of different ailments over the course of the season, remains available, and has given the Patriots very solid play on that right side. But is he the long-term answer there? might be a good idea to buttress that position in the spring. And so the name we're going to give you today is Arizona State's Max Ihanachor, who is a really fascinating prospect because he's relatively new to football. He was born in Nigeria, played soccer, excelled as a basketball player in high school, didn't start playing football until 2021 as a junior college student at East Los Angeles College. So, according to Brandon Thorne, who I think is one of the best in the business in terms of evaluating offensive linemen in the media space, he works for the Bleacher Report, does a great job, and has for years now. There is a wide variety of outcomes that you could see coming down the pike for Ihanachor because he is relatively new to the sport, but also because he's a tremendous athlete. Thorne says on Bleacher Report, because of his lack of experience, he has unrefined footwork, inconsistent leverage, and he has some glaring losses on his tape, but he has the frame and quickness to develop a role in a veteran-led NFL offensive line room with a seasoned position coach. Seasoned position coach. That sounds like Doug Marrone to me. Now, where would you end up taking a player like this? To me is the question, because at 6'6", 330, it looks like he has the frame. It looks like he has the athleticism. These guys just don't grow on trees. So you might be willing to take, at this position, somebody whose technique is a little unrefined. If you feel as though he can be taught, do you want to spend a first-round pick on him, though? And that's where CBS Sports in a recent mock draft had the Patriots selecting Ihanachor. Brandon Thorne, meanwhile, he ranks him as a fifth-round type of prospect. So, again, wide variety of outcomes, quote-unquote, variance with this particular prospect, but certainly somebody that we should be watching as the pre-draft process plays out. Let's keep an eye on what his testing numbers, for example, look like. How rare an athlete is he truly when he's able to do his workouts? Has he been able to clean up some of the things that Thorne has noticed on his tape? Is he able to take coaching? These are all things we might be able to learn about him over the course of the winter and into the spring leading up to the draft. Let's talk a little bit about Texas Tech's Romello Height now. This is an edge defender that looks like Mike Vrabel's type because he's not the biggest prospect in the world, listed at 6'3", 240 pounds, but explosiveness is his game. And when you look at the current edge defenders on this Patriots roster, whether it's Harold Landry or K'Lavon Chaisson, again, not the biggest guys in the world, not necessarily the types that you're going to put on the edge and say, go build a wall and defend the run first. And that makes sense. Mike Vrabel wants an aggressive front. He wants people that fly up the field, and that could be Romello Height. A very modern-day type of collegiate arc for Height. Started at Auburn, ended up transferring to USC, ended up then transferring to Georgia Tech, and then ultimately landed at Texas Tech. So 4 schools. He will be a 25-year-old prospect when he enters into the NFL, and maybe that will kill his evaluation for certain teams, and maybe that will kill his evaluation for the Patriots because, boy, is he already maxed out physically at 25 years old. And even if he was able to put together an impressive season at Texas Tech, is that because he's going up against 20, 21-year-olds at left tackle or at right tackle, and that has inflated his numbers? We'll see how teams end up feeling about him ultimately, but Pro Football Focus, they sent Height to the Patriots at the end of the first round. And again, you could understand why. Go back from earlier this season and look at what he was able to do against another potential first-round pick in Caleb Lomu out of Utah, one of 2 maybe Utah tackles that will go in the first round. But Lomu was the left tackle for the Utes this year. And Height gave him all kinds of issues. Head and shoulder fakes, just the sheer athleticism to bend and get around the edge. He has physical talent. The question is the age. He has a little bit of an injury history as well. Dealt with a shoulder injury that sapped some time for him on the field. So what is the medical on him? What is the overall scouting report? And what is the ceiling on him? And how are the Patriots looking at him in that regard? Fascinating prospect. And again, the type of player who, if all of those other things check out on the field, when you look at the tape, feels like he could be a fit for the Patriots. He has accepted his invite to the Senior Bowl, so it could be a lot of fun to watch him in just about a month's time down in Mobile, Alabama. All right, it's time to get to some of your mail now. We got some phenomenal questions for the mailbag this week. We're going to start with Carlos Lopez, who says, hey, Phil, do you believe the Patriots will play their starters for the entire game Sunday? Related to that, do we see Milton Williams and Will Campbell activated and playing some, quote, warm-up reps ahead of the playoffs? Thanks. To me, Carlos, it depends on how the game is going. I think Mike Vrabel is really going to have to react in real time to maybe best prepare his team for the postseason. And the reason I say that is because, number one, you want to win this game, in my opinion, because you want to have the opportunity to get that number 2 seed. There are a couple reasons for that. So if you can get to halftime and it's a blowout the way it was against the Jets, and you feel good about your opportunity of locking down at least that number 2 seed, if not the number 1, depending on how things are going, with Trey Lance leading the charge for the Chargers against the Denver Broncos, my guess is it's not going to go that great for LA, and my guess is that's going to mean the number 1 seed is out the window for the New England Patriots, so I'm not really considering it right now. We know the Chargers have decided to sit Justin Herbert. The Broncos, let's assume, are going to get that number 1 seed. I know they almost just lost to the 3rd-string quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs, but for the sake of this podcast, let's assume the Broncos end up taking home the number 1 seed. Of course, watch the scoreboard, and if you think there's any chance whatsoever that the Broncos may lose, then you might have to go all out and ensure yourself of a win if it is at all close against the Miami Dolphins, and maybe you would play your starters longer than you would ideally like to in a different situation. So make sure things are going as you expect with the Broncos. That's number 1. But then number 2, if it is close, even if the Broncos are blowing out the Chargers, in my opinion, you should be going for that 2 seed, and here's why. And it relates to another question that we got here. And this is from Joe Avidabile. Phil, who would be your ideal opponent for the Patriots in the wild card round, and why? Chargers, Bills, or Texans? Ideally, you would see the Chargers, in my opinion. What they've got going on the offensive line is an absolute disaster right now. They are starting Bobby Hart at tackle. They are starting Trey Pipkins at tackle. Those guys combined to allow 3 sacks last week against the Houston Texans. They were overmatched. I know the Patriots' pass rush hasn't necessarily been next level, but that's the kind of mismatch that the Patriots should be able to take advantage of, whether it's in one-on-one situations or whether it's in blitz situations. On 3rd down, Justin Herbert has been running for his life this year. The reason they are sitting Justin Herbert and they're not playing for better seeding potentially is because the guy's been banged up and they're trying to get him a little bit of rest. And in their view, probably there's not a whole lot of difference between the 6 seed, which is where they are right now ahead of the Bills, and the 7 seed, which is where they will end up if they lose and the Bills beat the Jets. Again, that would be the expectation for me. So you want that 2 seed, Patriots, because you would prefer to see the Chargers versus Buffalo, because there is a chance the Patriots could drop to the number 3 seed if they lose to the Dolphins somehow, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars end up winning their regular season finale and bumping up to that 2 seed. I don't think you want to see Josh Allen. Call me crazy. The one thing I would want to avoid is seeing maybe the best quarterback in the planet, who we just saw bring his team back from a 21-point deficit against the New England Patriots just a few weeks ago at Gillette Stadium. So you know the Bills aren't going to be intimidated by the Patriots, and the Patriots shouldn't be intimidated by the Bills. They should have won that game. They obviously beat the Bills in Buffalo. So I'm not saying that's an unwinnable matchup. I am saying you should want to see the Chargers over the Bills. The other reason you should want that 2 seed, you would have potentially home field if the Broncos were to slip up in the divisional round for the conference championship game. And I think that's a real possibility. This Broncos team is not your classic number 1 seed in the same sort of conversation as, for example, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs when they've been the 1 seed in the past, or Tom Brady and the Patriots when they've been the 1 seed in the past. The Broncos are a good team. There's no question. Their weak link is their quarterback. And when that's the case, they are in the running to be beaten by whichever team ends up going to Denver in the divisional round. I think the AFC is so closely stacked this year that there will be a real chance of the Broncos losing their first postseason game, which, if the Patriots can survive and get to the conference championship, would mean if they're the 2 seed, you're playing that last game before the Super Bowl at Gillette Stadium. So don't mess around with the Dolphins. Make sure you win that one, not only to keep yourselves in the running potentially, the small chance that you'd have the shot at that number 1 seed, but make sure you beat the Dolphins because you want that 2 seed. So I think you have to handle it the way you would handle any regular season game leading up to this one. Does that mean play Will Campbell a full complement of snaps? No, not necessarily. You should be able to beat the Dolphins without Will Campbell. You should be able to beat the Dolphins without a full complement of snaps for Milton Williams. But I think you should get those guys a few reps. I think you should get them, maybe it's a couple dozen, so that their first action back on the field isn't in a playoff game. So maybe be smart about those guys that have dealt with injury. But otherwise, if it's a 1-score game, I don't see how you could sit starters or real high-caliber important players for you, because winning this game does mean something for New England. All right, that's going to do it for the Next Pats podcast. Thanks again to Mike Sando for coming on and joining us here this week. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. We'll be right back here next week to wrap up the regular season. Can you believe it? This thing's over. Just about. One more week. Patriots, Dolphins. We'll be back here next week to talk about whichever situation it is that the Patriots are facing headed into the postseason. We'll talk to you next time right here on Next Pats.